Dan Tripp is a professional craftsman with over 40 years' experience in building handcrafted log and timber homes and cabinets. Over the years, he has worked with all known chinking compounds in North America to ensure log and timber homes are sealed airtight. As a result, he's discovered which compounds are easy to work with, are effective in keeping homes sealed correctly, and tried and true techniques for successful application. Dan recorded the following chinking tutorial at Sanson University. Please enjoy.
This building here has been up for, 25 years? So it's dried out enough that you can actually chink these in between these logs without a backer rod. You wouldn't have to put it in because the logs have moved enough that they're not going to move much more anymore, so that it wouldn't come apart. But a newer house, it has so much movement in it that you'd need a backer rod to put into this groove so that it could allow it to stretch. Because when this chinking goes in, the thicker it is, the less it'll stretch, the less it'll move. So you want to keep it as thin as possible on the outside edge. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a bit of backer rod in this one. Normally you would try and staple it in, but you have to use an air stapler, narrow crown. I'm just going to put a little bead of chinking in here just to put the backer rod into it.
Well, that'll serve as a good bond breaker, right, Dan?
Yeah. It'll bond in behind. It'll glue that right to it. See, it won't stay in there without the chinking behind it. So now that that's in there, I can take and cover this over with a bead of chinking. Now this will allow it to be thin in the middle, but thicker at the edges. Now, tools for putting this on, I've made up myself. I just generally take a regular putty knife, different widths and whatnot, put them in a vise, heat them up a bit with a propane torch, bend them, and then shape them so that they have rounded edges or round tips. I have all different shapes and sizes of these things because you get into situations where you need something different every time. So using alcohol, 99% isopropyl alcohol is the only thing it works with. Is 70% or 50%. It's got too much water in it, and this is a moisture cure chinking. And as soon as you put water to it, it starts to cure. It's very easy to get it a nice clean line with this chinking because it's easy to tool. And you want to keep it as narrow on these houses as possible. I have another tool over there that's much narrower. Yeah. You see, you end up with little narrow spots.
How much time do you have to work with it, Dan?
You have 20 minutes generally to take and work with it. If it's going to sit any longer than that, it starts to skin over. Okay. The surface will skin over, and then you can't, once it starts to skin, you can't really do anything with it because it'll take and wrinkle. It'll shrivel up. And so if you're doing a line and you know you got to stop it sometime, make sure you come to a stop at a point where you can take the break and do it. Because if you try and join it to that, if I was to leave this sit for, say 15, 20 minutes, I come back, it might even be less time than that, I go to join up to that, this part will wrinkle and you can't get it to blend. They just won't attach. The curing time for this in total is 24 hours if done fairly thin. And if you want to take and just clean up your edges here, I got a little bit here. Just a rag like that. And just clean it up. I don't recommend it, but I have taken spaces like this and put backer rod in and filled them too. But there's usually so much movement in these cracks that it separates at some point. I was getting frustrated having to return all the time to do repairs. People would take and come along after you'd finished a job and stick their fingers in it. And water-based chinking can take a week to a month to cure. And I'd have to put signs up all over the place telling people not to put touch the chinking. And what they do, they come along and they test it to see if it would dry yet. So I ended up having to repair all these spots, and that was difficult. And plus the fact, water-based chinking shrinks and it tears. If it's on a wider gap, as I'll show you on this other demonstration here, if it's not applied really thick and in the right way, as it's curing, it shrinks. And if there's a thin spot, it'll just rip. It'll just tear in that thin spot. And as I said, it takes so long. I chinked one house up near Hanover, and it started to rain. And I was under the porch. And I thought, oh, okay, this is safe. Okay? But he hadn't finished the shingles on the roof. And it was a water-based chinking, and the water came underneath the shingles, came down the front of the house and washed all the chinking onto the ground. With this, I've done this when it was raining. And if it gets wet, all it does is cure it. Okay? You just don't want to be trying it in a downpour. But, so that's the way this is applied in this area. I wouldn't recommend putting the backer rod into a corner. Like this one's, I could take and finish this one all the way down here if you want. In the corner here, it's too much of a 90-degree angle, so you put a backer rod in there and it's going to make for quite a wide groove. And in an older place like this one is, and it's already finished, all it's moving, just putting a bead down here will take and seal it right up. And since it's chinking, it aggressively sticks to steel, stone, aluminum, anything like that. It really sticks to it. You can take and use it down under here to seal against the mortar. You can lay stone with it, as Stuart and I have found out. You could lay brick with it, but you can't pile it up too high at first. And once it's cured, it's almost indestructible.
Dan, could you speak to the nature, you say the thinner it is, the more it stretches, so that would probably help the coverage. You need a lot less material? Or
yeah, you need a lot. You don't need that much material. Like you want it about 1/8 of an inch thick. Okay? With 1/8 of an inch to a quarter, you can get the stretch. It's not going to pull away from the logs. It'll bond better to that. But the thicker you get, you can't. It almost becomes solid. Okay? And it won't give in the middle. It'll let go at the sides. So it's like if there was going to be movement in these two logs, the first thing it would do, it would let go at the edges instead of in the middle. So that's why the backer rod is good on new houses.
That being said, it's easier to tool, how does this product in comparison to others as far as working with it?
You're talking about the water-based type.
Yeah.
It kind of smears. It's very uneven on the edges on it. You have to kind of almost paint it in on the edges. You can get it troweled down. The water-based type.
Oh.
It just because you spray water on it to take and lubricate it, and it kind of starts to run down the logs. It can be kind of messy, eh? And that's what I enjoyed about this, because I could keep this so clean. If you notice around the other side of the house where I've done it, it's just nice, neat lines all on it, So,
productivity-wise, like working with water-based, and you typically pulling that at pails or.
Oh yeah, you have to.
The sausages. What do you?
The sausages are much better. Your cleanup is just you end up with a saucer about so big around, just flattened out of aluminum foil that's the other end of this. And you just throw that in the garbage. It's very, very neat. Whereas the others, you have pails, you have to take and suck it out of the pails, which is, there's power systems too that pump it and they pump it out of guns. But the biggest problem with the water base is the shrinkage and the amount of time it takes to cure it. Because you can end up with so much damage. You could have it sitting out there, and if it's cold, you can't put that on. This I put on below zero. Okay, all I had to do was keep the tubes warm inside, bring them out, put it on, trowel it down, and then that's fine. It might take, it won't freeze. It just takes a little longer to cure. It can take a couple of weeks to cure. Okay, but at the same time, it skins over very fast. So there's very little chance of damaging it. I've never had to go back and repair any house that got damaged due to somebody touching it.
Product-wise, then there's a lot less waste factor with Samson than with the.
Oh yeah, yeah. There is a lot less waste. Took this out of the gun, and once it squashes down, you just got a little sandwich about that thick, okay? And there's hardly anything left in it. And what's in the tip of the gun, you'll lose at the end of the job, but that's it. And plus the fact too, all I have to do to stop at the end of the day is just leave the gun like that. It won't harden in the gun. It'll maybe cure a little bit. It'll cure a little bit at the top. All you do is pull the trigger on the gun and it'll pop that piece out. Okay, and there's no problem to it. This tube here was sitting in the gun for 2 weeks, and it's still liquid. Okay, but it had cured in the end of the tip for about that far back in. So you can go from one job to another and just, without having to take and clean everything out. And it saves them a lot of waste. Because if you open a pail of water-based chinking and you have to leave it sit for any length of time, it'll go sour. It actually really goes sour and it stinks. It'll almost mold in there, eh? So you have to use everything you've got, or else it's wasted at the end of the job.
Speak to some
Correct.
of the challenges out there that we've run into over the years, like for instance, blocking dovetails.
Okay, yes, that is a major problem in dovetail houses. If you block a dovetail house, you have to use all your grain going vertically in the blocks. They'll be putting blocks up beside every window joints. It's to support the logs, and they have to be made and go in on a flat. A lot of these guys will take and just drive a piece of wood in there and hope that it takes and holds it up. And if you put it in with the grain running this way, it's going to squash. And plus the fact it's going to shrink. Okay? Whereas if you do it vertically, it doesn't shrink. And we always put in hardwood blocks when we did it. We'd take and use either oak or maple or ash or something like that. And we'd put a flat on there and make a block up that fit exactly perfect in there. So that keeps it from settling down.
What
And
happens if it settles?
if it settles, it either squashes the chinking or, well, what else would it do? It usually took and squashed the chinking and the backer, and it would pop it, bow it out, and it would sometimes tear it because it would go in a different direction.
I know you talked about using it in other applications, like masonry and so forth. Like where would you use this stuff?
I've sealed glass in a car wash with it. I put it around windows in a car wash. I've laid stone with it.